Benjamin Franklin once said that in this world we must face two inescapable realities, death and taxes. Let me add a third to that, Taylor Swift. You could argue that 2023 was Taylor Swift's year. She earned more than $1 billion. She launched
$1 billion.
That's correct. She launched a sprawling 5-continent concert tour. She released 2 newish albums. And, oh yeah, she went to the Super Bowl to watch her boyfriend play a little football. But you could argue that 2024 might be her year, too. About a month ago, she released her 11th studio album called The Tortured Poets Department, that in its first week was streamed 1.76 billion times. That's almost as many times as people read Plugged In every day. With those sorts of numbers, I'm pretty sure that many a tortured poet would love to be in Taylor's shoes. Hi, I'm Paul Asay, and I've once again stolen the hosting chair from Adam Holz, who you can still hear.
Right.
So I can ask him all about the new Taylor Swift album.
Because Adam is a little bit of a Swiftie.
He's a little bit of a Swiftie.
I have teen daughters. Let's set the stage here.
Yes, but you've admitted that you've kind of become a Swiftie in your own right.
Yes. And
I've seen you in the parking lot. I've seen you bopping out to
Adam,
shake.
it's okay.
Shake
My
it
husband
off.
is more of a Swiftie than I am.
Okay.
And I'm 0% Swiftie, so.
Well, I'm glad we have these confessions on the table before we
We
talk about
dive in.
Taylor Swift owning 2024.
Yeah.
So clearly Adam knows what he's talking about. He'll tell us all about the new album. We'll join in and talk a little bit about Taylor Swift's influence and why it's an important part of so many families' lives. And then we'll turn our attention to a new Christian movie that's hitting theaters nationwide this weekend. It's called Sight, and it focuses
I see what you
on
did
a
there.
gifted eye doctor who's determined to help a cute little girl from India to see again. Will it work? You'll have to wait and see.
I'm going to go with probably, because if it didn't work, there wouldn't be a movie.
You know what?
But he went with wait and see because of the pun.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
You spoiled my pun.
I know.
We'll unpack those topics and so much more with our panel of experts, Jonathan McKee, Emily Chow, and yes, Adam Holtz, who have already all chimed in. But welcome, folks.
I'm glad to be here, Paul.
Welcome.
I feel welcome.
Very good. So for today's icebreaker, let's talk a little bit about music. One of the appeals of Taylor Swift's music is how relatable it is. I mean, her fans embrace her music in part because she feels like she's speaking for them. So now tell me a little bit about your own musical background. Tell me about a song and a moment in your life that sort of joined in perfect harmony when a song that you listened to seemed to sum up exactly what you were feeling, what you were thinking, what you were dealing with in life at that moment.
So mine was Jimmy Eat World's The Middle. When I was in 8th grade, that was when I heard the song for the first time. And it was like I was on some youth retreat and the band they played there covered it. So it wasn't even the original version that I heard first. But that was the first time that I heard it. And it was very perfect for my like peak teen angst lifestyle at that time.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, and it's such a great song.
It is awesome.
And
It's got a fun guitar riff.
We could have an entire
We could sing along.
conversation about the legacy of The Middle because it was a genre-defining song for the pop punk era. And since I'm talking, I will go ahead and go. I'm going to rewind the tape. And that's what it was. It was a tape to the summer of 1985. And I was one of approximately 3 people who discovered a band on MTV called The Unforgiven. If any of you have ever heard of The Unforgiven,
I have not.
We're not talking about the Western. We're not talking about the Metallica song. That's the name of the band. Anyway, they had a phenomenal album that was a little bit of everything, but they had a song on it called The Loner. And,
that just makes me sad hearing you say that.
The song started out kicking a can down a dirty highway, humming a tune, I think it may be My Way, stick out my thumb and smile as those eyes raise. What's he doing out here alone? Alone is where he's going to roam. And man, at 15, that was what I felt like. I felt alone. And I think I identified, I've talked in the past about Here I Go Again, the White Snake song. So
Sure.
I thought I would pick a different one. But, that feeling of loneliness and alienation and isolation was the predominant emotion of my teenage years.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, what do you have?
Man, I think I'm going to be pretty boring here because honestly, it was kind of more genres of music for me. I literally thinking about this, I'm racking my brain for a song that I remember influencing me.
It's Karma Chameleon, wasn't it?
I went through different phases of my life. My daughter actually did this really clever thing. She made a Spotify playlist called The Story of My Life, and it went through the different phases of her life, and it was real. And I like that, and I like that idea. So I did it too, and it was such a weird list because it jumped from genre to genre depending on my age. I remember, middle school years were really tough for me, and I was really kind of bullied and whatever. So it was almost a very depressing stage. And I remember, it's funny, you just talked about feeling alone, Adam. I remember songs like Heart Alone, believe it or not, because it was that romantic. I was thinking if I just had a girl, all my problems would be over.
Right.
And,
Right.
Any Chicago song. I mean, The Search Is Over,
Survivor.
And
Man.
it wasn't because I actually had found the right one. It was because I wish I had the right one.
Right.
Journey, Open Arms. And now here's how nerdy I was, okay? I played piano at the time, and I literally remember playing, Open Arms on piano. I remember playing Heart Alone on piano.
Yeah.
I remember when nobody was home, I would play the piano and sing, So yeah, I was a nerd. I'm confessing it all. Everybody could picture little Johnny alone singing, and that was the reason he was alone. But anyway, so yeah,
it explains a lot for both of us. I feel like
it does.
I feel like we should just can whatever comes next and have a karaoke time right now.
Oh, man.
Although my voice isn't that great, so maybe not today.
It is really true. I mean, when you think about some of these old songs, you just want to play them, you want to sing them. And one of the things that I've noticed is there's a lot of teen angst in these picks.
Yeah.
I think there's something about music that when it hits you as a teenager, it resonates like nobody's business.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I may cheat just a little bit on my own question. For whatever reason, when I was in my teenage angsty years, I was listening to Simon and Garfunkel. They were very, very, very
Yes.
old by then. But
literally,
man.
I just listened to a ton of their songs on a road trip recently, so I'm here for this.
Yeah. There were
I'm
so
with you.
many songs that they had. I had the greatest hits Simon and Garfunkel that I would play over
yeah.
and over and over
Yeah.
again. And it seemed like there were just songs that summed up what I was feeling at any particular time. Cecilia
Right.
was a nice, happy song.
Yes.
Not really.
Okay, but it's fun. It's upbeat.
It's upbeat, right? It's kind of one of
Right.
those
It's not
crazy
something
things.
depressing
Until you
song.
think about how utterly depressing
Well,
it is.
exactly.
You know what? Don't even get me started.
we're gonna
Sorry,
get
the Macarena. Do we really want to go into this?
So
No.
The number one wedding song that should never be played at any wedding.
I actually danced the Macarena at a wedding.
And it should never be played at a wedding if you know what the lyrics are
Oh,
about.
I know. That's one of the interesting things. We might get into that in our conversation.
Oh,
but
man.
but to finish off mine,
Back to you, Paul.
back to me. I think it would be The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes.
Because
So
speaking
good.
of,
I was hoping for Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme.
that's actually my favorite song, but it doesn't really have a lot of, lyrical oomph.
Right, because we don't know where Scarborough is. We don't know
Exactly.
what kind of fair it is.
It's a very lovely song, but I loved and I really resonated when I was a teenager, just the idea of in the clearing stands a boxer and a fighter by his trade, and he carries the reminders of every glove that has laid him down or cut him till he cried out. In his anger and shame.
fantastic.
Yeah, they were such great
and they hated each other,
lyricists.
so it all worked out.
They were the ones throwing the punches,
Seriously.
right?
I mean, what a mess of a relationship. Another podcast for another time.
Another podcast for
But now
another
back
time.
to you, Paul.
Now back to this podcast. So we've talked a little bit about, obviously, music that has moved us in our lives. Let's turn to the music that is moving a lot of people right now. And that's, of course, Taylor Swift's Tortured Poets Department. The anthology. If you just buy the regular Tortured Poets Department, it's a mere 17
You're only
songs.
half as tortured as you could be.
If you do the anthology, it's 31 songs. Wow.
I cannot fathom just sitting down and listening to all of those
31
songs.
songs,
Like,
man.
together, because I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, oh, my head hurts even just thinking about trying to focus for that long on one album, you know? Like, I can't do it. I prefer my music to have no lyrics. I think I've told you guys on this podcast before that, like, I prefer classical music, really and truly. So the idea of sitting and listening to Taylor Swift for more than an hour, I'm just kind of like, oh, I don't, you know.
So Jonathan's raising his fist in support, but we're going to talk about those 31 songs first.
Yeah.
Tell me, are there any of those 31 songs that Swifties will embrace with the sort of passion that we did with some of the songs that we talked about?
Well, yes, but no. And here's what I mean by that. If you are a hardcore fan of any band, you may be initially disappointed by your first listen to an album, but you will keep listening to it because that's the definition of a hardcore fan, and you will still come to love it. So
Listen till you love it.
well,
Instead of fake it till you make it, it's listen till you love it.
Listen till you love it.
And so I think the hardcore Swifties are going to embrace this. Briefly, Taylor had a Sirius XM channel completely devoted to her music when this album came out. And if you have Sirius XM, they do this regularly. When artists have new albums come out, there'll be a channel up for a while. And they would have people, you know, writing in and doing, you know, voice messages on how much Taylor Swift meant to them. And I think it was instructive and important for this conversation that if you're a Swiftie, you love Taylor Swift. Now, I will say I don't know that I completely own Swiftie as a title for myself. I have a 13 and a 15-year-old. I have songs of hers that I really enjoy that I probably wouldn't have enjoyed as much were I not raising two girls. But we've really tried to enter into that world with them. I compared the experience of reviewing this album to reading Romeo and Juliet 31 times in a row. Now, as lovely as Romeo and Juliet is as a tragedy, by the 31st time through, I'm like, oh, I get it. This is not going to end well. And so I felt like just emotionally, before we even get into the content stuff, this felt like a grim album. There's no shake it off anywhere in here. There's stories about affairs. There's stories about, you know, Kim Kardashian and how much Taylor Swift's mom hates Kim Kardashian. In fact, wished her dead at one point. I mean, some kind of weirdly shocking moments. There's songs about high school and having sex in the backseat of a car. There's songs about getting drunk. There's songs with a lot of F words, but there's not much that I would describe as fun here.
That's interesting. You were mentioning that the entire 31-song album feels very similar. I mean, not just in terms of kind of its downer position lyrically, but even musically.
Yeah, I didn't feel like there was much dynamic range. Like, usually you'll have albums, they'll be up, they'll be down. This is the upbeat one. You know, in the 80s, this is the power ballad, you know, where we're getting in touch with our emotions. This felt mid-tempo, dreary. It felt like cast-off songs that weren't good enough to make the last 3 or 4 albums, Midnights or Evermore or Folklore. I felt like the whole album was just kind of a downer aesthetically and lyrically.
Well, okay, so I'm not a Swiftie. I've already proclaimed that, but I don't know. I've always felt that a lot of Taylor Swift's songs do kind of have, like, at least lyrically, it's like you said, you know, reading Romeo and Juliet 31 times. For some reason, these songs connect with teenage girls. And I think what it is, like, when I was a teenager, I did love listening to breakup songs because it was always like, oh, I like this boy, but he doesn't like me. Or, oh, I thought there was something there, but there isn't. Or, you know, or like actual breakups and stuff, you know. There's all sorts of things going on in teen drama world where listening to a breakup song is kind of cathartic.
Sure.
And so it does not surprise me that this is essentially an album of breakup songs, because what is her target audience? teenagers.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where we honestly sound like a bunch of old people here around this table, because we're all talking and criticizing, and we might even have really valid criticisms. But the bottom line is, she sold, 2.6 million copies the first week, and I got to give her some cred that 700,000 of those were vinyl.
Vinyl.
But
We have two of them.
If I was going to buy it, that's what I would have bought it on. So anyway, the bottom line is, young people love her. Okay, so my wife's brother, 2 daughters, he took them to a Taylor Swift concert. As a matter of fact, I think he went to one beforehand just to see like what she was like, to see if he wanted to. I mean, he like double invested in this, and
wow.
And tickets were like $1 billion. So they just listening to them talk about. I don't get it personally, but I don't really get Cardi B either. So I mean, to me, it's at times we could sit there and just kind of criticize, but young people are resonating with this, and when you look at some of this stuff. They're hearing it over and over again because they do listen to it 31 times. And we've got to figure out and probably be a little strategic and make sure we don't overreact and sound like grumpy old man. Get off my lawn.
Right.
But be able to just be like, oh, wow, hey, tell me what you like about her. And be able to have some conversations, because maybe a song like Down Bad, which also is filled with filthy language, also has some talk about, kind of some Christian themes of crucify and roll the stone away and this and that. And it's like, oh, it's interesting. I wonder what she's talking about there. I wonder if she has a, religious background. Maybe get some conversations started on it. As parents, the thing that's tough is you can have these conversations, but at the same time, do you want your 11-year-old necessarily listening to it? That's where it's really tough. At times, we as parents need to say, hey, no. Especially to our 11-year-old, maybe not to our 17-year-old. But I think we always need to be ready to dialogue and not come across like grumpy old man.
Just speaking into the religious background aspect of it, and I do think that she probably does have a Christian background. People may not remember this, but she actually started off in country music, which is still just weird to even think about. But, a lot of country artists do have Christian backgrounds. They grew up in the South. They grew up in the Bible Belt. So it would not surprise me if she had a Christian background based on the lyrics in But Daddy, I Love Him. I was like, oh, yeah, this definitely feels like, a Southern drama playing out, But yeah, what you were saying there about she does compare her relationships to religious experiences. And I don't know, when I was reading through the lyrics and kind of considering that, I think what happened is I wasn't so much clutching my pearls, as she puts it so eloquently. It was more of a, man, I feel kind of sad for you, because if the most religious thing in your life is a relationship that ultimately failed, you have never known true joy. And the joy I'm speaking of course, is salvation through Christ,
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that the subtle shift that I noticed on this album is she is talking about love in explicitly spiritual terms repeatedly. And my own assessment, and maybe I will sound like a grumpy old man, is that she's frustrated with religious people who have criticized her. Mm-hmm. She's pretty harsh in the song you mentioned, But Daddy, I Love Him. And she's doubling down on the idea that there is a kind of salvation to be found in romance. And in the song Guilty as Sin, which has got all sorts of Christian imagery in it, she says, they don't know how you've haunted me so stunningly. I choose you and me religiously. And elsewhere, she talks about having cosmic experiences. And I would say, and this is where I think there's the connection point, Jonathan, that you're talking about. I think Taylor Swift is God-haunted like crazy, and she may not even realize it. She is longing desperately. And maybe I'm being a little bit, armchair psychologist here or theologian. I think she's longing for a transcendent experience. And what we're seeing on this album is she's actually talking about love and relationships and sex in those terms. And when you throw God out the window, we're hardwired for a transcendent experience. And we're going to look for that somewhere. And not only is she the patron saint of tortured poets, I think Taylor Swift is looking for salvation in love And she keeps going back to that well over and over and over again, which is what made this album so tiring for me to listen to.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. I mean, when we look at Taylor Swift, she would be the perfect example of someone who truly has it all, right? The $1 billion, the success, the adoration of everybody. But all of her albums seem very filled with a lot of angst, you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that makes her so relatable. And maybe some of that angst is because, you know, it's designed to appeal to her core audience. But I do think that that's an interesting dynamic that, to get to your point, Jonathan, there's a little nugget that you could even talk with your kids about.
Well, and I have talked with my kids about it because I'm not crazy about some of the lyrics here. We've mentioned in passing, you know, Down Bad has 18 F words on it. And Taylor seems to be increasingly comfortable using lots of really harsh profanity, which I'm like, it's not that I've never heard that word before,
Right.
but it's not a song that I want my daughters playing on repeat and getting desensitized to it. So there are content issues, but I think the bigger conversation is, what is Taylor's perspective about love and romance, and what should we be expecting as, you know, followers of Christ, as you were talking about, Emily? How do we navigate this? And I get why there's a huge appeal here.
Yeah.
But I think Taylor's perspective is truncated.
Yeah.
She's missing something.
One of the things that I wanted to just touch on, there's so many different ways that we could go with this conversation, but one of the things that I wanted to touch on, going back to Jonathan's point, in terms of talking about Taylor Swift with your kids, you know, one of the appeals is that she is so relatable. We started this podcast with that idea that she is so relatable. And I always think back to your teen years, parents just don't understand, right? So it's a good opportunity, maybe in some ways, for parents to be able to listen to Taylor Swift, to be able to talk with their kids, and to find out what Taylor Swift may get about their kids that moms and dads
that's great.
might need to dig into a little bit more.
And I think with any musical choice that your kids make, like Jonathan was saying, 11 might be too young for some of this stuff. 13 might be too young. Every family's different. Every kid is different. But I think Jonathan's point earlier that we don't want to just be grumpy old people, men, women, but understanding what is it that you identify with so deeply.
Right.
And I think that Taylor, as a musician, she writes catchy songs and she's a fantastic storyteller, and her stories are full of conflict and emotion and pathos. And I started out by comparing her to Shakespeare. I don't want to overstate it, but I think if you're a hardcore Swiftie, there's something in her that's not unlike the appeal that Shakespeare has had.
That's interesting.
That she's tapping into something that's kind of a universal experience. So I think just talking about the lyrics, what do you think about that? You know, how do you process that? There's a lot of conversation to be had here.
And maybe, you know, parents always, it's funny how often I find that parents are like looking for application. You know, they'll be like, okay, that's good, that's good. So what do I do? Give me something to do, you know, and
Right.
I understand that, because sometimes it's like, well, what do I do with this? And here's just an idea. And there is, honestly, there's no complete right cookie cutter answer for every situation. But if you've got a kid who really wants to listen to something, you know, if they're out of the house, they're going to hear it. They're going to hear it with the friend's house. They're going to hear it. You know, I remember we were pretty strict with my kids with music. As a matter of fact, I think I was a little too strict. And I remember we'd be at like, my kids were involved in sports, and they'd be at sports, and literally the coach like had music playing. What was I going to do? Go to the coach and go, could you please turn that off? You know,
That is from
So,
Satan.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, some parents probably have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But what I'm saying is the stuff is out there.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found, and honestly, listeners who have been with us a while can maybe go back and tell us what episode I shared this idea, because it's a long time ago. But one thing I did with my kids that I think I just accidentally stumbled on that worked is I really found that I didn't like them isolating themselves. One of the things we're talking about is them listening to it over and over again. Adam, you said that it's got this many F words. I'm not so thrilled about, you know, my 11-year-old listening to that over and over again and becoming a habit. So, you know, one thing we talk about very often in this podcast is not having devices in the bedroom so that at night they're listening to it over and over again as they go to sleep. That would be one thing you could do. The other thing that I did that I accidentally stumbled upon was I at Costco found these really cool, at the time, docking stations. Basically, that were like these music, machines that you could like put the old,
your iPod
charge
in.
the phone and play it. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know what today's equivalent was, but we basically had a rule. I bought them these stereos, and I was like, oh, hey, enjoy, whatever. Oh, by the way, we're not going to do headphones in the house. And as they were like carrying these gifts up the stairs, they were like, okay, because they got this new stereo and they were really excited about it. So I kind of bribed them to that rule, basically. But it was cool because I said, hey, whatever music you want to play, just play it out loud. And the cool thing was they were literally, I could at any time walk in a room and hear what they're playing. And typically they weren't playing songs with a bunch of F words blasting because they had to play it loud in their bedroom. So that was just kind of a way, and I'm not saying it's the solution, but it helped us where we just said, hey, we're not going to do headphones in the house. Yep. And so in our house, it was a safe place where, and then if my kid did say, well, I heard of this song so often in the car, my wife could say irritatingly, so I'd be like, hey, play it. And we just play it and try to not be grumpy old man. But literally, that's a time where you're sitting in the car with him and play it. And then you could ask questions. And I would say, do that. Don't be critical, but simply ask, oh, what do you think she meant by that? Interesting. Huh, do you think she really believes that? Huh. And he could do the Dr. Phil. How's that working for her? Or you could just kind of maybe ask some questions like that. And again, it's hard because you don't want to seem judgmental, but those are maybe opportunities to dialogue about some of the stuff and not have your kid playing it on repeat 31 times at night.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I wish we could continue for another hour, but we got to go on.
She'll probably have another album next year, and we can do it again.
Exactly. So clearly, Taylor is not
the Travis Kelce album is coming.
She will be a topic of conversation here for a long time to come, right? And just as Taylor is not going anywhere, neither is Plugged In. But while Taylor can just go on tour or release an album to raise cash, Plugged In relies on your generous donations to do what we do. We're a ministry after all, so if you feel so inclined, send us a gift. We'll tell you about how to do that in our episode notes on the Plugged In Show homepage. And if you do send us a gift, we'll send you a copy of our book, Becoming a Screen-Savvy Family. Adam talks very extensively about music in that very book, so you wouldn't want to miss that. All right, I've been talking plenty. Now I think it's time for you to ask some questions, Adam. I'm going to turn over the hosting chair back to you.
Over to me, Paul.
That's exactly right. Over to Adam. So, let's talk a little bit about Sight.
Let's talk a little bit about Sight. I think one of the things that I enjoy about working at Plugged In is sometimes we get to know about things that are a little bit under the radar. And this feels like a movie that, compared to Furiosa or Despicable Me 4 or some of the other big ones that are coming this summer, maybe this isn't a movie you have heard about, but I think it will be a film that after we talk about it, after you tell us about it, Paul, you may have more interest. So with no further ado, if I were Sight, what would I be?
So you would be this movie about one of the greatest eye doctors in the entire country, Dr. Ming Wang. He is world famous, really, for being able to bring sight to the sightless. He is very skilled about how he goes about his operations, and he does a lot of good work. This sort of takes us into his own personal story. He was actually raised in China during the Cultural Revolution there, when, going into medicine was not exactly a highfalutin field. So it talks a little bit about his struggles, his family struggles to move him and help him become the doctor that he always wanted to be. And that sort of juxtaposes with a more modern story where it talks about how he's trying to bring sight to a little girl from India who had she was actually scarred. Her eyesight was taken away by her mom. They poured acid into her eyes because, and get this, it was because legitimately blind beggars on the street make more
money.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So essentially, it's the story of how Dr. Wang tries to bring eyesight back to this little girl.
Wow.
And
that's incredibly dramatic.
Sort of the spiritual and emotional journey that he goes on during that particular saga.
And I know there's at least one big name actor who I'm not remembering. Who's in
Greg
this movie?
Kinnear.
Greg Kinnear. That's right.
Greg Kinnear is in it. He was nominated for an Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine. This has a pretty...
This is a better movie than Little Miss Sunshine.
I really thought so. It was a really nice movie. It also has, I got to tell you, it has one of my favorite actresses who has not been nominated for an Oscar, but her name is Finola Flanagan. And if you remember the others, she was the sort of the housekeeper from that Nicole Kidman movie. She's so good. She plays a nun in this.
I deleted that file completely because it was so disturbing.
I really liked that movie, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really does have some high-powered actors in it, and it is getting a wide release, so this is going to be available for lots of people to see.
And is it technically a Christian movie?
It is technically
or faith adjacent.
Yeah, faith adjacent, I would say would be fair. It's distributed by Angel Studios, which of course was the studio behind Sound of Freedom. It doesn't have a ton of faith content, but what it does is it really weaves it in very organically. You know, this is not a preachy Christian movie. This has a very organic display of faith because the little girl is a deeply committed Christian, even though she's 6 years old, as much as you can be committed. And she's taken, Finola actually plays a nun. And so we hear a little bit about the power of faith through both of those characters. And it strikes Dr. Wang very powerfully. Now, this is based on a true story, and the real Dr. Wang is a Christian. And the movie sort of suggests that he either comes to faith or comes back to faith through this movie. But it's very, very subtle in terms of Dr. Wang's journey.
And it's out this weekend, and we have often said, you know, every time you think, oh, I just wish Hollywood would make more good movies, this is one of those movies.
Yeah.
So if it sounds interesting to you, maybe go this weekend, because that will... It's like voting with your dollars to say more of this, please.
Right. And let me just mention that this is for a Christian movie. It has a little more content than you might expect. There's just a tiny bit of profanity.
I should have asked you that before I told people to go see it.
Just a tiny bit of profanity. You do have, because of the Cultural Revolution, the flashbacks into that time can get kind of violent. We see a guy almost pretty much kicked to death. Ooh. So that can be really hard. You don't see a lot of blood. It's not nearly as explicit as a lot of violent movies, but if you're sensitive to that sort of content, it's something to pay attention to.
Okay. Well, thanks, Paul, for letting us know what is going on with Sight.
All right, and now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the show, where I get to hear Adam and Ashley say hey.
Yeah, we call it Pop Culture Connection. It's a little game we play wherein our producer Ashley comes in. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Adam.
And she asks us fun questions, and they have something to do with pop culture. And of course, our job is to provide as many answers as possible. Not one good answer, but 14 medium answers.
Or in Jonathan's case, 25 terrible answers.
Terrible answers, because Jonathan has
30 seconds.
The fastest processor of anybody we've ever met. Ashley, take it away.
All right. Paul, I have you up first.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yes.
I'm ready.
All right. This is kind of the Would You Rather edition of Pop Culture Connection.
Oh, I like it.
Would you rather team up with Wonder Woman or Captain America, and why?
Oh, my goodness. You know what?
That's
I
hard.
would go with Wonder Woman just because, I would like to see how she uses that lasso. I think her bracelets are kind of cool. I could talk with her about the island that she was raised on. And all of her, talk about all of her training. She has so much experience. Captain America just started in World War II, but Wonder Woman, she's been around a long time. She's seen a lot of history. She could teach me how to horseback ride.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Also archery.
Wow.
So there you go.
And that thing she does with her hair. She could help you with
Okay,
that.
this is Paul's
This isn't your answer.
That's right.
I know, but it's such a great question that I wanted to participate.
8 points for Paul.
See,
Yay.
I helped Paul. Okay?
No, you did not, actually.
I think Adam gets a bonus point for knowing the name of the island,
Themyscira.
That was pretty
goodness.
good, I do have to say, even though it interrupted my
Yeah,
answer.
I got my nerd card renewed last week.
If I lose by a point to Jonathan, I'm blaming Themyscira.
Themyscira.
There we go. All right, Emily, here we go. Would you rather visit Wonka's chocolate factory or Hogwarts, and why?
Oh, definitely going to be Hogwarts. I could go to the Quidditch pitch and finally learn how to fly a broomstick. I could learn all the different spells from Flitwick and Charms class. I could learn Transfiguration from Minerva McGonagall herself. I could chat it up with Dumbledore, have some deep conversations. I could go to the Room of Requirement. If on the weekends, I can visit Hogsmeade and go to Honeydukes and all the different places they have there, the Three Broomsticks, and I could have a butterbeer. I could go down to the kitchens and tickle the little pair to open up the kitchens to see the house elves and get whatever food I want.
That was very good, Emily.
And
the only problem was it was the wrong answer.
214 staircases. 214 people.
There are two problems here. There is a portion of our audience that now will begin praying for you more.
Wow.
Sorry, fantasy is one of my top 2 genres of books. It's like fantasy and detective mysteries. Those are like my 2.
I thought that was
Agatha
awesome.
Christie.
Good answers.
Agatha Christie.
12 points, Emily.
Yeah.
That's like a personal best for you.
That was
I
like
think.
me.
The bar is high. There's no way I'm going to hit that.
Yeah, he
Pressure's
says
off,
that, and then
Jonathan.
he really will get 25
Pressure
points. Sorry.
is off.
Right? All right.
This where I can get stumped and get like the one long Paul answer is all I'm going to do in this one.
Might go that way. Jonathan, would you rather be forced to sing along or dance along with every song you hear, and why?
Definitely sing along because my wife says I'm a terrible dancer. Also, I have a wonderful voice. Also, I could try it in like different types of voices. I could try opera. I could different genres. The other thing too is that I think that way blind people could also enjoy what's going on. Also, my dog is more scared when I sing, and I think it's kind of fun to watch him run away. I think it's really good to be able to try different riffs. I could try crescendo to see if it really actually works. I could imitate.
And then you could decrescendo.
I actually heard that my time seemed to run out much faster. Boy,
Oh, well, 9 points for you, though.
Ooh, man.
Emily
job.
killed it.
Yeah.
Good
You were
try.
talking fast, though. You gave me a run for my money, I
It
feel
was
like.
the butterbeer.
Do you really
butterbeer.
have a good voice, Jonathan? Are you lying about that?
We're
We're not going to find out right now. Now back to you, Ashley.
All right, Adam, you're up. Would you rather pilot an X-Wing, a TIE fighter, or the Millennium Falcon, and why?
Well, it's got to be the Millennium Falcon because it is the iconic Star Wars ship. You get a co-pilot, so, you can talk to them. They actually absorb asteroids really well. Oftentimes, the hyperdrive is broken, which makes for unexpected drama. But when you cut in the sublight engines, it makes this cool noise, and there's this great blue light in the back. And even at sublight speed, you can still get away from 4 or 5 Star Destroyers simultaneously as Darth Vader makes faces underneath his mask, and also Boba Fett makes faces under his mask.
Very nice. 9 points. Very good. Emily's our winner, and we
Emily.
are all a little bit more nerdy. Thank you.
Those were
That
not
was-
shallow answers, Paul. I want you to know those were all deep. Those were deep answers.
profound.
And if you really want to know,
Plumb the
the
depths of
Millennium
our
Falcon
souls.
is a Corellian freighter.
Yes,
It's
it
a
is.
YT-1300. That's the model number.
You would
my
know that.
Goodness, Adam.
I have one thing to say.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
No, NCC 1701D.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes.
Starship Enterprise.
And
That's
now,
right.
Paul, let's land the Enterprise.
Here we go. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. It's always great to talk about the sights and sounds of pop culture. And now we'd love to hear from you, our listeners, too. Are you a Swiftie? Have you listened to Tortured Poets Department? And if so, what did you think? Are you looking forward to Sight? How can you, like Dr. Wang, use your own gifts to help those around you? Let us know on Facebook, on Instagram, or send an email to team@thepluggedinshow.com, or leave us a voicemail on the Plugged In Show homepage. And of course, if Plugged In has been a helpful resource for you, let us know. For a gift of any amount, we'd love to send you one of our books, Becoming a Screen Savvy Family, sight unseen. You can learn how to, thank you very much. You can learn how to do that on the Plugged In Show homepage too. Thanks again for joining us. We're looking forward to spending more time with you on the next installment of the Plugged In Show.
Have you felt it? the calling, the whisper from God that you are meant to help children in out-of-home care? This might be fostering or adopting a child, kinship care, or as a valuable family ally. Focus on the Family has created a website that can help you find your unique purpose at waitnomore.org. No act is too small to a child or fostering family that needs your help. Learn more at waitnomore.org.